So why is it that nearly 20 years after the original Devil Wears Prada, people are still debating whether Miranda Priestly is actually a good boss or not? It's because Miranda Priestly gets results, right? She builds excellence, she demands precision, she develops talent, but she also loses her people. And that's the part that people don't talk about or they even overlook. So the real question is, if a leadership style gets results, but people don't stay or they burned out, is it actually working? And that's what we're going to talk about. Hi there. Welcome back. I'm Leeza Steindorf. I'm a Forbes executive coach. I'm also a business consultant, and I work with leaders and individuals on how they show up, how they communicate, and lead with clarity and composure and intention. And before we continue, if you like this kind of content, please go ahead and subscribe, because then you'll know when new videos come out. So if you've seen The Devil Wears Prada, you probably remember Miranda Priestly, right? She's played by Meryl Streep. Oh my gosh, amazing, amazing actress. And you also remember Andy Sachs, played by Anne Hathaway, and Emily Charlton, played by Emily Blunt. Two very different women trying to, let's say, survive and succeed inside this world of Miranda's, right? And the character of Miranda is widely understood to be inspired by Vogue's editor-in-chief, Anna Wintour, based on the author Lauren Weisberger and her experience when she was Anna Wintour's assistant. So this isn't just fiction, and even if it's not that particular person, it is certainly based in reality. It's a dramatized version, if you will, of a real leadership style. High standards, low warmth. And on the surface, in the world of numbers, that works, right? But from my perspective, Miranda isn't misunderstood. She's a cautionary example, right? She's the kind of person that we want to really pay attention to, because what she builds is performance, but what she loses is sustainability. So let's start with what she does really well. She sees excellence immediately, like she's got this keen eye, and she has a really super clear standard, like there's no ambiguity about it, right? And she does not tolerate mediocrity, not having it. So people rise to meet that, right? Andy gets sharper. Emily gets almost impossibly precise. And everyone around Miranda just moves really fast and anticipates everything they possibly can and performs as this super, super high level. That's real. So if we stop there, it's easy to say, well, she's effective. And she is. But effectiveness is only part of the entire story. And we need to look further than that, because it's more complex. Because performance under pressure always raises another question. What happens when the pressure stops, when it's gone, right? So if you look at how people in the film, right, if you look at how people around her operate, they're not relaxed. They're actually not really confident in themselves, right? They're not thinking freely. They're scanning constantly. They're paying attention. They're trying not to make mistakes, trying to anticipate her every action and reaction, trying to stay in her good graces, right? And that's not ownership. There's no personal responsibility in that. It's actually hypervigilance. And this isn't just a feeling, it's actually measurable. So there's some landmark research actually by Google, which I just love because the results that came out of it are amazing, and found it. What they did is they studied all the teams across the board, and they wanted to figure out what is the strongest predictor of success. Like from teams that really worked well and teams that didn't, what was it that differentiated the ones that did? And the number one factor was psychological safety. What that means is that people that felt that they were safe enough to think and speak out loud and take risks within their team without having any fear of being made fun of or of being dismissed, they thrived. And so did their output and their creativity and the initiative. So in other words, the teams that felt safest to speak and think freely outperformed the others, even when those other teams may have had more talent. So when people can live into their potential that way, man, do they produce. But when they are living out of fear, when they are performing because that's expected of them and not because it's internally motivated, when they do that long enough, they stop trusting themselves. And you see that in Andy in the film as she starts measuring herself by Miranda's approval, right? And you see it in Emily, who's talented and committed, but also constantly bracing for failure, right? So now the question becomes, if people are performing well, but they're losing their own instincts, their own ability to navigate, the connection to the drive within themselves, what is it that you're actually building? And this is where leadership actually becomes a trade-off. I mean, we'd have to define leadership, and I could talk about that for a long time too. But the trade-off is that fear can drive performance, right? It can increase speed and reduce errors, and it gets like short-term output. But it also does something else. It makes people dependent, not independent thinkers, not people who can execute freely. They become dependent on approval and on direction from you or from external. They actually become dependent on the leader. That's it. And over time, that dependence actually shows up in real numbers, right? It's not just this soft thing. So Gallup reports, they've shown that highly engaged teams, like teams that we were just talking about, like at Google, that have psychological safety, that feel comfortable, that are creative, when they feel safe and supported, they're 21% more profitable. And interestingly enough, or it's not surprising at all, they show significantly lower turnover in their teams than if they don't feel that way, right? People want to come to work. They want to contribute. Like there's an energy there. So when you take that safety away, you don't just lose people. You actually diminish their performance of the ones that are there, okay? And that's the cost. Because when people don't feel safe, when they don't feel like they can think for themselves and bring things to the table, they don't grow into leaders. And that leads actually to a more important question. If your team only performs if you're the leader, right? If they only perform when you're present, what happens when you're not? So Miranda doesn't lose because she lacks talent. That's clear. But she loses because people eventually stop choosing to stay. It's not fun. It's not juicy. It's not nourishing for them, right? So the most capable people, the ones who could operate independently and get stuff done and like fly, they leave. And in the film, Andy's the clearest example of that, right? She becomes better inside Miranda's world, but she actually realizes then that she doesn't want that world to define who she is and how she's going to live. Like she finally finds herself. And Emily, even though she stays longer inside that system, she shows the other cost that we were talking about. What it looks like when talent becomes tied to that constant pressure and approval, right? And that's the real risk of this leadership style. It becomes actually a dysfunctional system. It doesn't collapse immediately. It'll continue. But over time, it's not sustainable, not at the level of thriving that may be initially there. And that brings us actually to something pretty critical. Is short-term performance worth or a valuable enough exchange for that long-term instability? You got to pose that question, because part of why this style of leadership exists is because it feels powerful. The person in power, man, Miranda, is calm, controlled, precise, and that's part of what makes her so effective. But control and leadership are not the same thing, okay? Control is managing behavior. It's managing people. It's a top-down, hierarchical, pressure-driven way of leading. True leadership develops people. It encourages them. It draws out the potential that people have, and it makes them want to bring it forward. It's an incredibly juicy way of working and collaborating. And if people aren't developing, they eventually either disengage from where they are or they just leave. Because as people, that's not fun, right? It's not what feeds us. So now the question shifts again, okay? Do you, if you're in leadership, if not, ask your company, do you want compliance or do you want capability? Like, do you want somebody who's just going to say yes? Or do you want someone who's going to really develop their skill set and bring that to the table? So a strong leader doesn't just raise the standard. They actually uplift and raise the person. And that means that you have people that think more clearly. They take ownership. They begin to trust their own discernment and decisions. And they don't need constant validation. That does demand more of the leader. Because now you have people that maybe push back, that ask questions you're not prepared for, that aren't just yes people, right? They're actually engaged, which means the leader needs to show up. The leader needs to have that ability to interact. And that kind of interaction is not fear-based on either side. When a leader feels comfortable developing people, it's because they have the confidence that they can hold the framework for those people. And when people feel comfortable and confident to step forward and speak up, they're not fearful. They're feeling confident that they can do that, both from within themselves, but also in that framework. So that kind of environment comes from clarity and consistency and building trust. That's just simple, right? And this is where actually research aligns again with this, what I'm sharing here. So Harvard Business School shows on the research on psychological safety shows that people who feel safe to contribute and do not fear punishment or they're not afraid of being embarrassed, their creativity increases, their learning accelerates, and their performance at a team level actually raises over time. Like it's a progressive development. And how can that not serve your output? It has to, in the long run, increase your outcomes. So Miranda Priestly does get results. That's not a question. But the question is, what does it cost her, and especially the people she's working with, in order to get those results? Because if people improve, but they don't stay, or even they burn out, which is worse for them as humans, if they perform but they don't grow, like they just become automatons, then what you've actually built is just almost like a machine, and that's not sustainable with human beings. So let's go back. It's really interesting to Anna Wintour, about whom this role in Miranda Priestly is supposedly based, right? Because that part's really interesting too. So 37 years she was the editor-in-chief at American Vogue. She stepped back from that day-to-day role in 2025, not that long ago, while still remaining Condé Nast's chief content officer and Vogue's global editor-director. I mean, she's still got these positions. But she told Vogue staff that her greatest pleasure now is helping the next generation of editors to really to storm the field with their own ideas. Isn't that interesting? So that doesn't erase the demanding reputation she had, but it does, I'm going to say, reinforce the point of what's leadership all about, really. So even in the real world version of this archetype of leader, it seems to have evolved toward the part that Miranda struggled with the most. Not just setting a standard and making everybody, jump up to that bar, but really developing people who will carry the legacy forward, who will take whatever company it is and move it forward. Yeah. And if we look at a nuts and bolts, really human level, we spend almost 80,000 hours of our lives at work, like overtime. 80,000 hours. That's a lot of time. Just logically, doesn't it make more sense to create environments where people can actually think and contribute and bring their optimal to the performance, rather than being scared to death of what's going to happen if they don't perform? Yeah? So here's something for you to think about for yourself. What's your workplace like? How do you feel when you show up? whether you're in leadership or you look at leadership, does leadership create an environment where people perform because they're afraid to fail, or because they feel really confident that they can lead and step up and really bring their optimal to the table? Yeah, something for you to think about. And if it's not an environment that really thrives and that you feel good about, what's one thing, one conversation, one question, something that you can do or change that will have an impact to turn it toward a direction where people really feel good about bringing their best? Okay, so if this gave you something to think about, maybe a new perspective of leadership, go ahead, like the video, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe to the channel so you'll know when new content drops, and share this with someone who may be in a similar situation right now. Because leadership really isn't just about results. It's about who you are and whom you actually help up along the way. That's really leadership. Thanks for listening. Until next time, be well.